We begin with the Supreme Court this morning and what will be another blockbuster day. Today, the court is expected to decide two more cases with far-reaching implications for millions of Americans. That includes one that would impact anyone with federal student loans. This, of course, comes on the heels of yesterday's landmark decision that struck down affirmative action in college admissions. In a more than 200-page opinion, the court's conservative majority overturned admissions plans at Harvard and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. The schools were accused of giving substantial preferences to Black and Hispanic applicants while discriminating against Asian students. Writing for the majority, Chief Justice John Roberts said affirmative action programs violate the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause and, quote, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. In a scathing dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson listed the legal and institutional roadblocks that generations of people of color in America have had to overcome, from slavery to redlining and Jim Crow, writing that, quote, deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. As expected, reaction in Washington was divided largely along partisan lines.
Discrimination still exists in America. Today's decision does not change that. But we cannot let the decision be a permanent setback for that.
This is the day where we understand that being judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin, is what our Constitution wants.
We have full team coverage of the fallout from this seismic decision and what we can expect from the court today. We're going to start with NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good morning. So help walk us through this ruling. It's a little bit murky. It says colleges shouldn't use race for admissions, but it says people should be judged by their individual experience. Now, for many, their race is part of their experience. So what does this mean, especially for students who are going to be applying for college in the future?
Diversity is still an important interest on campus. In fact, it is still a compelling interest on college campuses. What the court decided yesterday, in a sense, was narrow in that it concluded that UNC and Harvard's race-conscious admissions policies violated the Constitution. But implicit in that ruling is also the understanding that virtually no college could ever come up with a race-conscious admissions policy that would satisfy the Constitution. So going forward, universities could hypothetically still take race into account, for example, in the essay process, if they write about how race has affected their life in any way you can imagine. In addition, colleges can still use other factors such as socioeconomic status, even geographic area, probably as long as those are not obvious proxies for race, but colleges can use those unrestricted categories to try and build a diverse college campus. Not a racially diverse college campus. They can, but that was not the mandate of the court in Grutter. The compelling interest has never been racial diversity. It is overall diversity. Now, what that is, that's another question for another day.
All right, so today is the last day of the Supreme Court term. We are still expecting two major decisions. One of them includes the fate of President Biden's loan forgiveness program. It would impact the financial futures of 40 million Americans. This is deeply divided along political lines. Do you think that the court is going to fall on ideological lines, or could it be unpredictable where they're going to go here?
This could actually go either way. If they decided on what I would call the merits, whether or not Joe Biden had the power to, quote, waive and modify the power that's given in the actual language of the regulations and the statute, does he have that power to cancel student debt outright? Does that constitute waiver or modification? But the court may never reach it if it concludes that the challengers here, the states, never had standing. They didn't have a concrete enough interest to bring this lawsuit. That is a possibility. Even the conservative bloc of the court is receptive to standing arguments. I wouldn't be surprised if in this case the Biden policy stands, if for no other reason then the challengers didn't have standing.
The other big case we're following involves a Christian web designer who refused to provide services to same-sex couples. This is being pitched as civil rights versus religious rights. What should we expect here?
This is probably going to go the way of the conservative majority on the court. The issue really is whether or not designing a website is a sale, in which case it may be discriminatory to pick and choose who you design for, or is it speech? And if it's speech, then it may be more protected. You may be able to discriminate in the sense that the state cannot compel you to endorse a specific message. In this case, a message approving of same-sex marriage. In the analysis, this case could go either way. But if you're a betting person, it will probably go the way of the conservative bloc of the court.
We're going to find out very soon. Danny Savalos, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Our coverage continues now with NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli, who's here with us. So, Mike, the president was disappointed with the court's ruling on affirmative action. What did he have to say? Is there any action he can take now in response?
Well, of course, White House officials say as much as they were disappointed by this decision, they were not surprised by it. And so they spent months planning for what the administration could possibly do in response. But when we heard from the president, he did lay out what he considers a new test that he hopes will meet this new Supreme Court standard. Take a listen.
It's done more to unravel basic rights and basic decisions than any court in recent history. And that's what I meant by not normal. I think that across the board, the vast majority of the American people don't agree with a lot of the decisions this court is making.
There was responding to a question by what he meant when he had responded to a question earlier in the day about whether the Supreme Court was a rogue court. He said it was not a normal court. Obviously, the Supreme Court itself is becoming a major political issue at this moment.
So, Mike, one of the other big lines to come out of that interview was the president's opposition to expanding the Supreme Court. What did he say? This is something liberals are pushing for. Why is he against that right now?
Yeah, candidate Joe Biden got a lot of heat about this issue during the primaries and even in the general election. Remember, during the 2020 campaign, we had that unexpected opening in the Supreme Court that was filled in the final months of the election. The president, the candidate at the time, resisted the pressure to expand the Supreme Court, come out in favor of that. He appointed a commission to consider it. Yesterday, he made it clear he still hasn't changed his position. Take a listen.
I think if we start the process of trying to expand the court, we're going to politicize it maybe forever in a way that is not healthy.
That you can't get back.
That you can't get back.
Now, what we had in the Dobbs decision a year ago, this decision yesterday, the decisions we're expecting later today, we have the possibility of significant rights being taken away. This is what the president really believes is making this a political issue, but he's not willing to take that next step to change the actual structure of the court itself.
All right, Mike Memoli, thanks so much. Good to see you here in New York. Joining us now to talk more about the affirmative action decision is the Dean and Professor of Law at Howard University School of Law. Professor, good to have you with us here. So I want to read more of that dissent from Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She wrote, "Deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. Although formal race-linked legal barriers are gone, race still matters to the lived experience of all Americans in innumerable ways, and today's ruling makes things worse, not better." So, Danielle Hawley, please tell us, in your mind, is this ruling making things worse? And what does it mean for the schools that say the consideration of race is essential to ensuring diversity?
You know, it's making things much worse. I think what Justice Jackson pointed out in her dissent and Justice Sotomayor was simply that race is still a really important part of American life. And for many people, it plays a negative part in their life. So kids growing up K through 12, significant resegregation of our public schools and lack of resources in those schools, and the lived experience of those students, of Black and Latino, Native American, Native Hawaiian students. I think there is significant negative impact from many of those experiences on the potential to compete for college admissions at places like Harvard and University of North Carolina. So Justice Jackson says the majority has a let them eat cake obliviousness about the reality of race in the United States. I'm becoming president of Mount Holyoke College tomorrow. I start, and I can tell you at places like Mount Holyoke and lots of other places, this ruling will cause a major disruption in terms of admissions and also the feeling of belonging for students on our campuses.
Congratulations on that new job. I'm going to ask you a question specifically about that job in a moment, but first I want to talk about the majority opinion, Justice Roberts. He left open the possibility of colleges considering the issue of race in a student's application, saying a student must be treated on his or her experiences. I want to play sound from a student from Howard talking about this.
The idea of drawing on the hardships and pain and suffering of minority communities to even get accepted into college in the first place, that's just not, I don't understand why POC tiers have to be my, a committee's, reasoning or like that push to let us into programs. It doesn't make any sense.
So, Professor, what's your reaction to that?
You know, my reaction is very much that I identify with the students' comments. I think, you know, to say that race should be included in things like essays and considered in terms of an individual, I think is to distort what was happening in college and university admissions already. That's exactly what was happening. There was holistic admissions practice in which students were able to talk about race in ways that may be uplifting instead of being just about suffering. And I think what Justice Roberts was really asking, and the majority is saying, is that you can somehow talk about individual race issues if it relates to your own individual story. And I think that leads to this idea that it must be some kind of negative connotation with race, even though we know that race has a significant impact on daily life for almost all Americans.
Professor, soon to be president, I do want to ask you about that new job. You're the incoming president of Mount Holyoke College. So in that position, what do you think colleges are going to have to do now to make sure they are diverse? How are they going to have to change the recruiting and application process?
You know, I spent a lot of yesterday reading statements by presidents of various colleges and universities. And I think the one universal thing that I saw was that every college and university that I read yesterday reaffirmed our values, which is that diversity of all kinds is critically important to how we educate the leaders of tomorrow. And so at Mount Holyoke, we will definitely continue to hold that value that we are educating culturally competent leaders for the future. And so it's necessary for us, while we respect the law, to also continue to hold our values very strong, which is to celebrate diversity of all kinds.
Danielle Hawley, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck as you embark on this new chapter.
Thank you.
In other news, extreme heat plus all those flight delays and cancellations, they're threatening to disrupt the 4th of July holiday weekend. AAA says 50 million Americans are expected to travel 50 miles or more for the holiday weekend, and the TSA is preparing for record passenger volumes. All that could cause more issues at our nation's airports. They're already packed with passengers after thousands of flights were either delayed or canceled in recent days because of stormy weather and staffing shortages. On top of that, hazy and hot conditions are putting a damper on 4th of July celebrations, with temperatures expected to climb to triple digits again in parts of the South, stretching from Texas to Florida. All this while the East continues to deal with poor air quality from the smoke generated by those Canadian wildfires. We're covering all this for you this morning. In a moment, Michelle Grossman will have the latest forecast. But let's start with NBC News correspondent George Solis at Newark Liberty Airport. So, George, good to have you with us. There's a lot of flight frustration out there this week. Is the situation expected to get better or worse as we head into the actual weekend?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. A lot of travelers hope the situation gets better. Maybe no rain on the parade, but that air quality, that smoke is certainly the wild card here. No ground stops as of this morning, but the FAA warns that it's obviously something that travelers should keep in mind this morning as they begin to head out. Today, a record-breaking 2.82 million expected to be screened through TSA, and you mentioned already more than 50 million Americans planning to head out for this holiday weekend, the majority of them going by car. The good news there, gas is about $1.30 cheaper than it was this time last year. A number of Americans, as I mentioned, flying today. The headaches at the airport so far this morning here at Newark Liberty. Not as many delays as we've seen over the last 2 days. Already, though, as I'm looking, we're seeing the numbers in the double digits. Yesterday, they creeped up into the triple digits. The majority of issues with United, the airline says they are seeing meaningful improvement. But I tell you, I spoke with a number of travelers yesterday who say they still don't have their luggage. And at this point, they've decided to just stay within the New Jersey, New York area and sightsee as opposed to sleeping here at the airport, which we've seen throughout the last couple of days. Number of travelers say, you know, they're packing smart. They know that this was going to be a very busy travel period. Take a listen to some of the tips they are offering for other people who are planning to embark on this holiday journey. Take a listen.
Pack light. Don't overpack, because then it's just a hassle to have everything and trying to keep everything together.
Book the earliest flight possible, because when you book it early, there's no line, there's no wait.
Keep your stuff on you, pack with whatever you can bring with you, and don't check stuff, because I've had awful experiences losing things when I travel.
Yeah, travel light, and it may seem like common sense, but of course, if you have your airline's app on your phone, keep an eye on that to see if, making sure that there are no delays or cancellations. And if you happen to have pre-check, making sure that that is on your ticket, because obviously if you don't, that might delay you in the line, causing backups. And really, so far this morning, a lot of smiles, but we're going to keep an eye on the situation here, Joe, because we know as the day progresses and those delays start to creep up, those smiles can quickly turn to frowns.
No doubt. I like getting tips from fellow passengers. That was a great idea. So, George, let's talk about the millions who are going to be driving to their destinations this weekend. When should they hit the roads, and what cities are expected to see the worst traffic?
Yeah, so it may seem like common sense, but we'd like to remind people that obviously getting out on the road earlier is the best option. Anytime after 6 p.m., also pretty good if you want to head out on the road. Right now, we're at the peak travel, especially here in the morning. So if you're going to stay and watch right now, watch this segment and then get on the road to kind of beat the rush. And of course, as you would imagine, some of the major cities are going to see the most backup of traffic. We're talking Seattle, D.C., and Boston. Here in New York, of course, you're going to see a lot of backup. But the key thing here, get out early, or if you're not going to try and beat the morning rush, definitely get out a little bit later in the evening, Joe.
All right, and if you're not leaving, please keep watching us right now. All right, George Solis, thank you so much.
Exactly.
Latest now on that near blazing heat that's hitting some parts of the country. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is here at the end of a very long week with your morning news now weather. Michelle, good morning.
Hi there, Joe. Great to see you. Yeah, we continue to be very, very busy. I know it's a busy weekend, as George just mentioned, and weather-wise, we're going to keep it busy because we're still seeing heat alerts. We're still seeing poor air quality, although that's going to improve over the next couple of days. But the price we're going to pay is some showers, and then also watching the chance for some strong storms. Let's start with the heat story because we're still looking at 64 million Americans under heat alerts. A lot of these are excessive heat warnings. That's where you see that bright pink color. So Fresno, Las Vegas, Phoenix, down over to Little Rock, Nashville, Birmingham, Jackson, New Orleans, you are under an excessive heat warning. And that's because we're going to see temperatures soaring once again into the triple digits, well above normal for this time of year. This is in dangerous category, record-breaking categories as well. So we're looking at temperatures right near the 100-degree mark in Kansas City. That's 11 degrees above normal. 98 degrees today in St. Louis, 102 in Memphis, 100 degrees in Tulsa. So that's today. Then as we go throughout tomorrow, we're going to see that more widespread heat throughout portions of the Ohio Valley into the Tennessee Valley, the mid-Mississippi Valley. So it's not just the South we're talking about. 98 degrees tomorrow in Nashville. That's 9 degrees above normal. 98 degrees in Birmingham. 99 in Little Rock. So hot in so many places. And this summer warmth is going to stay in place throughout the holiday, too. So we're looking at 93 on Monday. Then July 4th, this is Richmond, July 4th, 91 degrees. You want to stay indoors, get the air conditioner if you can, because when we factor in the humidity, it's going to feel like 110 in some spots. We're concerned about the heat. We're concerned about air quality as well. 114 million people under air quality, or at least a poor air quality alert. We're looking at Canadian wildfire. There's over 500 wildfires burning in Canada. Over 243 of them are out of control. So we're looking at widespread fires in Canada from the west coast to the east coast. This air is making its way down to our area. So the U.S. looking at that smoke coming down, but that's going to improve over the next couple of days. We're going to see the wind switch around. We're going to see some storms, and that's going to disperse some of the smoke. So that's good news. But some cities this morning, D.C., Pittsburgh, Buffalo, in the unhealthy category. The good news is we're going to see some improvements as we go throughout today and then especially into this weekend. So that's the air quality story. Also looking at the chance for severe storms, 24 million people at risk for severe weather, really large hail, 2 inches or greater. Some winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. A few tornadoes are possible as well. And look at this widespread area. We're talking the Central Plains to portions of the mid-Mississippi Valley, the Ohio Valley into the Tennessee Valley. So Colby, Kansas City, Springfield, St. Louis, Lexington, Nashville. You are under the gun for some strong storms this afternoon and evening. That's certainly going to damper some start to the weekend plans, also some travel. We'll look at the travel forecast in just a bit. And then tomorrow we'll see an enhanced risk. So more people, 35 million people at risk for severe storms and enhanced risk. That includes St. Louis, Evansville, Paducah. That's a likely spot for seeing some storms. Winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Could see some hail and also a few tornadoes. So we do anticipate some impacts, as George mentioned. St. Louis, Cincinnati, Nashville. Joe, we're looking at likely delays there as we go throughout this Friday. Back to you.
And hopefully we can get that smoke out of here in time for the 4th of July fireworks next week.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle, thanks so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.